Massimo, thank you for joining the podcast. I'm happy to have you here. I have had the pleasure of selling your wine for 2.5 years now with Chambers and Chambers, and you were one of the first wineries that I was exposed to when I started, and I, like always in Italy, think I know a lot about Italian wine until I find a new region or a new grape, and I realize I know so little. So I'm happy to have you here. I've been a big fan of your wine for a long time. Can you kind of tell the listeners the name of the winery, where you're located, and kind of a quick history on the winery?
Yeah, first of all, let me just express my gratitude, and thanks a lot for inviting me here. It's really encouraging what you were saying, that you were exposed to our wines and that made you feel you wanna keep going, you know?
Yeah.
We come from Campania. Campania for sure is not the let's say, I don't want to say it's a minor area, but it's not Montalcino, it's not Barolo. So they all know Chianti, Montalcino, Barolo. But Campania, I think it's a pretty exciting region. Number one, because of its geography, and geology as well. So it's the only region in Italy which is surrounded by 5 different volcanoes. Mm-hmm. They all know Mount Vesuvius because of Pompeii, because the Roman city, which was unearthed, discovered. But then they forget that we have other 4 volcanoes. So we have Rocca Monfina, which is just on the border between Lazio and Campania. And we have a pretty renowned appellation there. It's Falerno, one of the ancient appellations, during the Roman Empire. And then we have the Campi Flegrei, which is a bay above Naples. And they all know Pozzuoli here in US because Sophia Loren was born there. And that area over there is still active. It's not a dormant area at all.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's one of the most active ones, right?
Exactly. I mean, you see smoke coming out of the of the soil. Right. And whenever you get closer to the bay, you start smelling, sulfur. Crazy. Yeah. And then in front of that, you have Ischia, which is an island, and unlike Capri, which is a rock, that island used to be a submerged volcano 55,000 years ago. That's why the tuff, the soil, the ash is kind of green. Yeah. Okay. And then you have Mount Vesuvius, of course, and on the border between Basilicata and Puglia, you have Vulture. There you have another appellation. So every volcano has got its own appellation. So I think that makes you feel you want to explore the region more. And every site differs one from the other because these 5 volcanoes have restructured the geography, the geology, the orography of the entire region. So this is number one. Number two, I think, because of its history. So Campania was the doorway to southern Italy. It used to be the capital of the Kingdom of Two Sicily. The kings of Naples were related to the Austrians, because Maria Carolina was the daughter of Maria Teresa d'Austria, the empress. They were related to the Bourbon kings in France, because the brand new king in Spain, Filippo V, was the nephew of Louis XIV. Okay, so the very first Neapolitan king, Charles III, was the son of these Bourbon kings, was the nephew of Louis XIV, so Filippo V. And he married actually the Farnese, Elisabetta Farnese, who was a Medici, and she belonged to the Farnese family. Wow. So, they were...
Very political marriage.
Yeah, they were connected to the entire world, So... that contributed to the development of the viticulture in southern Italy, because these guys, they could not stand the fact that their relatives, especially in France, they were doing a better job. And don't forget, we are here in US. Today we are in San Francisco. And Thomas Jefferson, while he was ambassador in Paris from 1785 to 1789, he took notes of all the Grand Cru, existing in Bordeaux. But then he came down south, in Italy, in northern Italy, actually. Okay, so, and he visited Piedmont, Toscana, and he took notes of all the different appellations. And one of the grapes that he noted, in his diary was Aleatico, which is a totally different grape from Aglianico. Okay, so Aleatico used to be was one of those grapes cultivated in the Isola d'Elba, on those areas which were called the Presidi Borbonici, because there was a kind of enclave. You call it enclave?
Yeah.
It was an area which belonged to the Kingdom of Two Sicily, even though it was in Tuscany.
Yeah.
Okay, so Aleatico, it's documented being one of those grapes which were part of the royal vineyards of the kings of Naples in the Kingdom of Two Sicilies. So just to mention two main reasons, geography and history, which makes I hope, makes you feel you want to discover more about that region.
Certainly, yeah. Very compelling history.
Yeah.
I think the thing that maybe intimidates people the most about Italian wine is just how confusing it can be. But I think, the more, it's like any wine. When you first don't know anything about wine, you start to taste wine, you go like, what's Cabernet Sauvignon? What's the difference between Cabernet Franc? And you start tasting more and drinking more and learning more. I think it's like anything. You just have to taste more and you learn more. And I think one of the most amazing things for me about Southern Italy is just, affordability. You have some of the longest history with wine in Italy, and you have some of the most affordable wines comparatively, compared to your northern counterparts, let's say.
Yeah.
Do you think is that mostly like a supply and demand issue? Do you think like there's not as much demand, so you can't charge as much? Or is it easier to grow grapes because of all that amazing soil that you have?
I would say we in Italy actually started a little later compared to the French.
I see. Yeah.
So this is something, which I don't want to say is a kind of hindrance, but it's something which counts a lot.
Yeah.
So the big revival in Italy was, I think, Piedmont. After the Second World War, and in all over Italy, I think the big revival was during the late 80s, beginning 90s. I think even the Ministry of Agriculture in Italy realized that they had to subsidize project for reviving that precious treasure Italy has. So the amount of indigenous varietals, ancient vines that we have all over Italy. So finally in the 90s, they started developing project for reviving all those indigenous varietals. And that's what happened, in the area where we are. So compared to France, I think that came slightly later.
Sure.
And by the time we finished the process, which is not ended up yet, we, compared to the French, we were for the very first time approaching the international market with all our different labels. Because in the past, if you just see the reviews, for example, Gambero Rosso, 30 years ago, there were just a few wineries. Now, I think they are rating more than 2,000 wineries in it. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And so going back to what you were saying, now maybe there are too many wineries.
Sure.
I don't want to say that this is a bad thing, but when it comes to the recognition that you are trying to establish within the market, it's going to be very tough to compete with the other 1,999 wineries.
Yeah.
So I'm one, and I have in front of me, a bunch, a very wide range of wineries.
Certainly.
So now it's all the way around. There are maybe too many wineries, which is a good thing. The standards are very high.
Yeah.
but it's very difficult to let's say establish a consistent recognition within the market. It's very difficult to make the consumer remember who you are. And for sure, those who belong to the wine industry, and I'm talking about journalists, reviewers, sommelier, the buyers, in the wine stores, the reps, agents. I mean, all those people who are within the wine industry, they know what you're doing, of course, and it's easy to establish a relationship, at that level. But with the final consumer is very tough. Okay, it's not like in the fashion business where the trademark, has got its visibility.
Right.
Within our market, it's a little more complicated. I don't know if I answered the question you raised.
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on a lot of different factors that I think contribute to what I was talking about. But yeah, I mean, you're right. I guess that's a good point. Is back in the day when it was what we were able to get here in the U.S., we were able to get so less wines that only maybe the top producers or maybe only the bottom quality producers would make it to the market. Like I think about Lambrusco as an example I use all the time as something that we would get really not great quality and we weren't getting a lot of high quality. And I think maybe that not necessarily tarnished the region, but it kind of maybe dilutes the name. You think like Chianti's Chianti. It doesn't matter who it comes from. It's all the same, which obviously we know is not the case, which kind of brings me to another question as you're my first Italian winemaker that I've had on. Thank you for being here again. I wanted to ask you a question, and it's maybe not really a hot topic necessarily, but I see as an outsider, I see pros and cons to the DOCG system. And that's something that I know that is kind of polarizing for a lot of Italian winemakers. The pro is DOCG, and DOC is like qualitatively, you think of like that's a reliable brand, a reliable level. But in a way it can be kind of a hindrance. How do you feel about the system as a whole?
Thank you for this question, and I would say, of course, appellations are very important because behind an appellation lies an entire work usually made by the government, the ministry, the universities, the winemakers, the wineries, the unions, And for sure, it's a way to root the wine, in this case, the product, to its origin. Okay, so most of the appellations are for sure an indicator of quality, but above that, there's the connection with its origin. Okay, so most of the appellations, DOC, IGT, DOCG, they are limited. They limit the borders. Within which winery, a facility is allowed to champion, that appellation within its own label.
Right.
Okay. So, but let me tell you, with the appellation, I wouldn't be that worried, as a consumer. Okay. Well, what I think we got to do today as winemakers, as wineries, as producers, is to give value to promote the vineyard and the winery of our neighbor. This is even more important. So what I'm trying to say is that no matter if you are an IGT or a DOCG or a DOC, what we have to do is to make people understand that that kind of product comes from that single vineyard, and near to that, you have your own neighbor, your own competitor, whatever you want to call him, friend, colleague, who is doing a different job. It's not better or worse, but it comes from an area which could share the same quality of your vineyard, in a different way, okay, with different features and different characteristics. So I think what we have to learn as Italian winemakers today, and this is something that we got to learn from our cousins in France, especially in Burgundy, but even in other areas, is that our own parcel, okay, is not the best parcel, in the area. Is a vineyard which can give birth to a certain wine, and close to us there are a bunch of other wineries with other characteristics. So what I want to say, we gotta develop a zoning project in every single area, and we have to promote the quality of the land rather than the skills of the winemaker.
Right.
Okay? So it's not me who is adding something to the wine. It's the land. It's the soil. It's what we call the terroir, which is giving birth to a certain product that you cannot export anywhere else. So that's a kind of safeguard to imitate or to ape what you're doing, So I don't think Chinese can imitate. Maybe they could imitate the fabric. They can imitate, a bunch of other products, but you cannot replicate that
terroir.
Yeah. It's impossible. And we came to a point where we have to talk about that. We always talk about revising the appellations, revising the hills, revising the aging, wood rather than stainless steel. No, what we have to do today is to learn the lesson from our cousins, in, I would say, Burgundy, where those guys have been able to establish a close relationship with the terroir, with the land, with the parcel, with a single vineyard. And it was like that when Thomas Jefferson came in 1785.
Right.
Those are the Grand Cru, and they didn't change them.
Yeah.
So I hope I answered your question, So appellations are fine, but they don't make you sell a territory, okay? They help a lot, of course, but I think it's up to us to start developing a zoning project, all over Italy, in order to, let's say, give visibility to a single terroir. I've seen that, for example, on the Mount Etna, they've done a great job with the Contrades.
Right.
They've done a very good job in the Barolo area. I think they're doing that in Montalcino as well. So in Campania, we have an important job to develop, is to recreate a zoning project where you have, for example, let's talk about the Fiano di Avellino. You have Summonte, Montefredane, Lapio. So those are areas that we gotta, we have to, let's say, for which we have to draw the borders, in a very strict way. And we can do that, in Altacampania, where we are, because we are in a wonderful area made out of 8 different communes: Formicola, Pontelatone, Castel di Sasso, Liberi, Ruviano, Piana di Monteverna, Castel Campagnano, Caiazzo. And the every single site has got its own features.
Right.
And I think what we got to do today is to put all the winemakers together, all the wineries. We are almost 30. And I think what you have to do, we got to be united, talk to each other and try to promote our area in a proper way, a scientific way, and with passion, and trying to make our consumer understand that product comes from that piece of land.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, and I think that's something that we've touched on in the podcast before is that collaboration, right? Working together. We were talking to a Napa winemaker, and we were talking about kind of the collaboration back in the day. They used to collaborate. You used to work with your neighbors. I'll lend you my tractor, lend me your sheep. You know, they would work together all the time. You can use my sorter. Exactly. I'll use your crush.
Exactly.
And I think that that's something that felt like it was really like on the come up. We saw it in Santa Lucia Highlands too. There was like people working together really well, but it's kind of like, it's almost like with this over commercialization of like big brands, it feels like it kind of pits people against each other. But I think one of the cool things about where you're at in Campania is maybe a good and a bad thing. The good thing is that there's not a massive company that's in there just kind of producing a okay wine that's kind of becoming the standard for your region. You mentioned, and I think this is a great point, you guys have an opportunity to work together and work collaboratively to create that standard. And I think that's really beautiful. So
yeah. And then, you know, speaking of that, I brought you guys just a sample of what I was trying to say. So, for example, this is the soil, which is a typical clay and limestone coming from the Monti Trebulani. So in Campania, we have 7 Antiapennini Campani. The Antiapennini are those 7 range of mountains which are not attached to the Apennini, which come from Liguria all the way down. Exactly, they cut off Italy in 2 sides, and but they share the same structure. Okay, so these come from Let's see if you. Okay, so this is limestone, typical of those 7 Antiapennini, and the Ponte Latone where we are, which is part of the DOC Casavecchia di Ponte Latone, is on the foothill of the Trebulani mountain, which are very renowned because the Second Punic War occurred, you know, with Hannibal, that actually stayed there for almost 10 years trying to attack Rome, with no success in the end. Okay, and then one of the most important soil that we have, I hope we can see that, you know, on the video. Let's see if you. This is the Ignimbrite Campana. This is volcanic ash coming from Campi Flegrei, you know, area. So all in Italy, it's Can you? Do you think it's visible? Yeah, more or less. Okay. So this is a kind of grayish volcanic soil. There are 3 main areas in Campania. We were mentioning Ischia, which was a submerged volcano, which came out 55,000 years ago. Then we have the Ignimbrite Campana, which is 39,000 years ago, you know, when this big eruption occurred, this big, let's say, telluric earthquake. And then 22,000 years ago, we have the yellow tuff, the yellow ash, typical of the area of Naples. So 3 eras and 3 different soils.
Significantly different. I mean, the first one that you showed is more crumbly. It's like like breadcrumbs maybe, and then this one is like turmeric powder, or like, you know, it's like a silt, or like a clay almost.
Exactly. And this is actually, let me tell you, it's a special ash, which is lighter than clay. So that's why throughout the years it's been washed down the valley. So most of the crops and the vineyards below 300 feet on the sea level, they are mainly volcanic. And this is the area that the Romans used to call Campania Felix. Campania is the region. Felix means happy. Happy because the soil was pretty fertile.
Right.
And so in the Campania Felix, you could grow whatever, you know, tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, San Marzano. You could have your own orchard, you know, vineyards, the Asprigno, the Pallagrello, you know. And so it was always producing good quality products.
Produces quite well. Yeah, that's something. Before I ever got in wine, I'll do a slight tangent. Before I ever got into wine enough to understand how important volcanic soil was, I got into cigars, and I went to Nicaragua, and there's an island, the Ometepe Island is a volcanic island, and they fight over the soil all the time. Who gets to use it? Who's going to plant there, because it's just so fertile. It's so like nutrient rich with all of the nitrates in the soil. And then recently I got a book actually from Sean, and it's Volcanoes in Soil, and it's Volcanoes in Wine. And it's a book about all these different volcanoes all over the place and their impact on wine and their impact on agriculture. And it's crazy to think, when we talk about that in your region alone, there's 5 volcanoes. So there's lots of really amazing soil, lots of really diversity in soil and diversity in what you can grow.
Yeah, and one of which is still, active, which
Right.
is actually in the area of Pozzuoli in the last couple of years, there have been so many earthquakes and people are kind of scared of there.
Yeah.
That's pretty little sad too.
Yeah. It's concerning. I mean, even to see Etna erupting recently, it was like, you kind of get nervous, and maybe it's.
But we get nervous. Sorry if I interrupt you. We get nervous because unlike Etna, which is mainly an effusive volcano,
Sure.
Ours are explosive volcanoes.
Right.
So they never tell you when they are going to erupt.
Yeah.
So that's why people die, in Campania, in the area where we are, and that's why. We were talking about Pompeii.
Yeah.
So Pompeii was discovered just because it was not burned by lava.
Right.
It was covered by these massive clouds of ash that just collapsed early in the morning,
Right.
while people was coming back home after the big eruption, And this has been, well described by a bunch of Roman historians, and Pliny, for example, who was there with his own boat,
Right.
Trying to get closer, to the land.
Isn't that where he died?
Yeah,
Didn't
exactly.
he die because he was too close?
The elder, exactly.
Yeah.
Because
Pliny the Elder, right?
Pliny
Sorry,
the Elder,
the dad.
Yeah.
I mean, incredible history, and I think you kind of touched on what you think the future is. And one of the things that you do as a winery, and unfortunately, I'm not exposed to probably enough Campania wine outside of yours, which is fine because I love your wine. Are there a lot of other producers that are doing what you're doing with this crew system?
Yeah. Let me tell you, in Altacampania, we are pretty fortunate because so far, I would say the agreement within the wineries and the group of wine makers is pretty good. So we gather every now and then. We try to interact and trying to focus on the main problems and issues, that we face every day, trying to promote our land and trying to promote our products. So there are a bunch of I would say pioneers, within us, trailblazers like Vestini Campagnano, for example. Sure. That is an existing winery, and they were among the first ones, to label those varietals as a single vineyard, as a single varietal, because actually those varietals have always been produced. There are a bunch of pretty old labels as well, but those guys were among the very first ones. And I would say there are a bunch of other pioneer that I would like to mention. For example, the former mayor of Ponte Latone, Alfonso Cutillo, who did a great job in order to promote the area, trying to submit those varietals to the university and the ministry in order to get the acknowledgement requested for being part of the national list of grapes in Italy. And then there are a bunch of others. I could mention Il Verro, Viticultori del Casavecchia. It's the former cooperative, who turned into private company. They're doing a marvelous job. Then we have Sclavia, we have Piccirillo, we have a wine maker. Yeah, I would say is maybe the only woman involved in the group of winemakers who is so passionate about what she does, and her name is Paola Riccio. Then we have Cantina di Lisandro. Then we have I regret, maybe I'm forgetting someone, but anyway. So we have a bunch of guys, even young guys who just graduated, at University of Portici, which is the University of Naples, and they graduated in enology and agronomy, and these guys, have traveled all over Europe, some of them, and they came down south to give us a hand in order to make high quality wines. So I think there's a revival which is still on. I hope we can keep being united, in the future. And I think one of the most important things, besides quality and besides what I was saying, the terroir, I think it's a promotion of the product, not only in our country, Italy, not only in our region, not only in our province, but my recommendation to everybody would be that of taking your own suitcase and travel all over the world, because there's always room for everybody. Yeah. And especially here in the United States, I've always noticed that there is curiosity. There is always interest. Sometimes I wonder how. Maybe because Americans feel always a void in terms of history, and they gotta fill it up. Yeah. But here, wherever I go, with you guys trying to describe what we do, I've never ever found someone distracted while I was talking. Yeah. Sometimes it's easy when you talk to 100 people, and you see at the end of the room there's always someone, Drifting off. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I can tell people asking questions after 30-minute speech, which makes me feel that there is always room for everybody. So I encourage everybody, to just travel and trying to make people understand that we come from a very interesting region. I'm not saying it's the best, but whatever we do is so interesting. And then let me tell you something about the varietals. We've got so many different varietals. We have Pallagrello, Casavecchia, Pepella, Genestra, Tintore, Fiano, Greco, Falanghina. So, Campania has got such an interesting and wide range of ancient vines, native to the different areas, which makes our region and our history, I would say, fascinating.
Very rich.
Very rich.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that kind of segues into the other question that I was going to ask you. If you could maybe just give us like a quick description, or maybe a quick biography, if you will, on Pallagrello Bianco versus Pallagrello Nero, and then also Casavecchia, which to me are kind of, you make so many wines, but those wines are the wines to me that are just really, really outstanding. And those are the three that at least we represent here in the US, that we also represent the cru version of. So can you kind of describe to people what those grapes are like, and in general, the wine that they would yield? Okay. As best you can. I know everybody probably makes them a little different. But.
Yeah. Let me just start from what you were mentioning, our cru Pallagrello Bianco, coming from up the hill. So we've been experimenting this vineyard for 20 years, and before releasing, the vintage by its own, it took a while. Finally, we ended up bringing into the cellar grapes with a pH below 3.2. And I can promise you guys, 3.2 for us is a great achievement. So it's particular vineyard. It's on the foothill of Monte Friento, which is the second biggest mountain on the Trebulani range of mountains. We have Monte Maggiore, which is 1,030 meters, which I think is 4,000 feet. And then we have Monte Friento is 770 meters, which I think is almost 3,000, a little less than 3,000 feet. Anyway, so at the foothill of this second biggest mountain, we have our best vineyard, which is at 360 meters above the sea level. And it gives us grapes, which are astonishing. Pallagrello Bianco is it's a unique grape. It tends to be to lean towards the acidic, even though the acidic content normally, and especially coming from down the valley, is not so high, but the perception within your mouth is always I would say fresh. It's a wine which cleanses your palate easily. So it's not difficult to recognize this varietal blind tasting it. And then speaking of the same varietal, I mean the Pallagrello Nero is the sister varietal of Pallagrello Bianco. Pallagrello Nero, I should say, it's, at least for us, is a tough beast, to tame.
Sure.
It's a grape which tends to dry out your palate, and so all winemakers try to do their best to lead the varietal towards more balanced quality wine,
slightly softer, slightly more giving.
So it's interesting because among the three is it has got this aromatic which makes the wine pretty easy to distinguish, and to be recognized among other wines, always blind tasting it. But at the same time, these characteristic of the tannins make the wine a little too dry. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
Okay. So what we're doing in the crops, in the vineyards, with the training system. So this year, for example, we have experimented. We were actually applying the Guyot system, one-way Guyot system. Then we switched into Cordone Speronato,
which are all trellising systems.
Yeah, we are trying a different systems, and now we went back to the Guyot, but it's not a one-way Guyot. It's what we call a bilaterale. Okay. So we're doing a bunch of different experimentation, tests in order to improve the quality of the wine. But anyway, even Pallagrello Nero, it has got its unique identity. Sure. And then Casavecchia, I think among the three is the one which has got the highest aging potential. Is a wine that can easily age for 20 years, and I'm not overindulging.
Right.
It's a pretty rare grape. The legend says that this big vine was found near Casavecchia,
in like an old fort, right?
Exactly. And from this big vine, their cuttings were taken in order to, repropagate them on the American rootstock. So it's a unique grape. It's a grape which doesn't really produce a lot. It's pretty low yield because of its I would say I would call it characteristic during the flowering, because after the budding, you have the flowering and you have all those green flowering berries that sometimes they strive to pollinate the ovaries of the pistil in a proper way.
Right.
Because most of those male stamens, are shorter, and they are not able to properly pollinate, the ovaries. So you have this kind of natural abortion, and then on the other side makes this varietal pretty interesting because it's not a very good looking bunch, because all the berries are far away one from the other.
Clusters are kind of gnarly.
Yeah, exactly. So, but then what you bring into the cellar, it's a pretty high quality, grape.
You don't really have to do a lot of green harvest or anything.
No green harvest, exactly.
It out.
And then something, which is helping us a lot. This is a varietal which is not exposed to rot or to I would say mold.
Sure.
Because since the berries are far away one from the other,
flow.
Exactly.
Wow.
So this is good. Even though it's a varietal which is very sensitive to mildew.
Sure.
Okay. So we gotta be really careful about that. But anyway, long story short, Casavecchia is a varietal which has got the highest aging potential. And something that I really appreciate about this varietal are the tannins.
Right.
So all these two varietals are more tannin forward than fruity forward. But the tannins of Casavecchia are never green, they're never angular, they're never edgy, they're never harsh. You feel them, you feel the grip under the palate, but they cleanse your palate. So it's a wine that you want to pair with food.
Yeah.
It makes you feel you want to drink more, and eat more after the first sip. But tannins are always silky and delicate. So, and it's a varietal which deserves more attention by the public for sure.
Yeah. I think one of the things that you touched on that I think is really fascinating, specifically about Casavecchia, and I'll elaborate for any of the listeners that don't know, is like the amount of concentration that comes from losing berries, right? I always have kind of put it like if a plant grows 100 grapes, each grape gets 1 point of flavor. But if you cut 50 of those grapes off, each grape gets 2 points of flavor, right? And so it's able to focus on those grapes a lot more. And you see old vine wines are always sought after because of the concentration. Yield is lower, but concentration is higher. And so in this, it's essentially like an old vine / green harvested grape just on its own, which sounds financially very challenging because it's really hard to yield a lot. But again, to consider that, the top production is retailing at $80 to $90 a bottle.
Exactly.
It's pretty incredible value.
Exactly. Okay, let me tell you this. I think one of the reasons why this varietal became an unknown and forgotten grape is due to the yield.
Sure.
Because the farmers, the vintners didn't really have much interest in developing something which, was not a money maker.
Sure.
So that's why I go back to what I was trying to say, a minute ago. Promotion, the commercial side of the entire, the entire business, the entire project is so important, because if you don't have the chance to sell your wine to a certain price, you would never pay back
the cost.
The cost.
Yeah.
So, and this is the reason why in the past that was not, it didn't occur, because people were buying, bulk wine.
Right.
Okay, so they were going to the winery with their own jar, with their own damigiana. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but today we do have the chance to sell our products to higher, price. But in order to do that, there are, behind efforts, time to make people understand the quality of the product.
Right.
So for sure, for example, our Trebulano Riserva, you find it, now we just released the 2017 vintage, and it's the wine that you guys are, carrying here in San Francisco. And you find this bottle, on wine list at $100, $120. So that means that finally we start repaying, our efforts, recuperating some costs, some investments, whatever you want to call that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I'm so happy to be able to work with these wines and taste these wines. I mean, I'm not sure people, there's a lot of theory that people are drinking a lot less than they used to. And while that's unfortunate, I think that, a lot of that stems from maybe not having enough respect for the product. And I think it would be really hard to listen to a story like this and not have respect for what you're doing, because not only are you, you could move to Tuscany and grow Sangiovese and have a lot easier time. You could move to Piemonte and grow Nebbiolo and have a lot easier time. You could move here and grow Cabernet and have a lot easier time, right? But you're choosing an uphill battle. You're choosing a steeper climb, and it's because it's what you believe in, and it's because it's what you care about. And I think that's so incredible. I mean, and then to hear that not only do you have to grow the grapes and make the wine and work with your neighbors to try to promote the region, but now you have to come here and work to promote the wines even more, and then to help training and sell through and all of these other things. I mean, your job doesn't stop when you harvest. Your job doesn't stop after you water for the day, right? You have a very complex task ahead of you.
Let me tell you this. Let's say if I'm saying something, which fit into the description you were giving us. One of the most important Italian historians, whose name is Giuseppe Galasso, was depicting the figure of what we call the entrepreneur. Okay, I like this word a lot. Okay, because if you think about entrepreneur, is someone who starts something. Okay, right. So but what do you start? What are you doing? So I think I like this figure because unlike others, think about it. The entrepreneur is someone who needs to pull, different, different strings.
Sure.
Okay, because you got to take care of the labor force. You got to take care, as you were saying, of the territory. You got to take care of your facility. You got to take care of the quality. Yep. You got to take care of the promotion. So the entrepreneur is what I would define complete, sometimes even, I don't want to say mediocre, because in order to be an entrepreneur, you don't necessarily have to be so skilled in every single field, but you gotta have a wider, knowledge, right. A wider vision.
Like a jack of all trades.
Exactly.
Kind of. Yeah.
Okay. And you cannot expose your company, the group of people you take care of, to the I think the biggest mistake that an entrepreneur can make is just to make one of those pieces of string, just being cut off.
Right.
Or so you gotta make sure you are pulling those threads all together at the same time, and they gotta be, lined up.
Right.
At the same layer. Okay, they gotta always have the same notch.
Right.
You gotta make sure that every day you have that notch, a little higher.
Right.
So you cannot abandon one of those. So let's going back to the promotion. You cannot just make good wine, without spending time to make people understand what you're doing.
Right. You got to sell it. You can make a bunch of it, but you got to sell it.
Yeah. So you got to be always balance, trying to push all the different aspects, sections, of your company, ahead. Yeah,
that's perfect. Well, we should wrap. Before we wrap things up, because we've got to go work the market today, do you have any final thoughts, any words of wisdom you'd like to share with any of the listeners?
Maybe again, we got to do two things. Okay, we gotta promote the wine of our neighbor. Okay,
yep.
We have to make people understand that we are not the only ones.
Right.
We go nowhere alone. Okay, by our own. And number two, we have to promote our terroir, our territory, our piece of land, because it's the only component within our, let's say, adventure, within our project, which survives to us. Okay. So the land will survive no matter what is going to happen to the winemaker. Okay. I could be the most important winemaker. I could be a professor, or I could be the most important entrepreneur, or I could be the most important, worker. Yeah, but the territory, the land, the vineyards, they survive to the elbow of the winemaker,
right,
to the label of your own wine, and to the quality you're making. Okay, so I would say those two things. Let's start promoting our territory, the vineyards of our neighbor, and we gotta go, we gotta go all over. I mean, the world, trying to promote what we're doing.
Well, I think that's perfect. And I think that having you here and having people meet you, I think really speaks to that. It speaks to that terroir. It speaks to that sense of place. It speaks to who you are, and it speaks to that belief that you have. So thanks for being here. And
thanks a lot. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And let's go kick ass today.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Ciao.